And boom, according to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. It is 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Nice to have uh, people already joining in the chat. I'm seeing like zero at the top of this, but I see people are counting nine. Oh, so we're increasing. People are rocking in as you do. It is a long weekend currently. It is Culture Day tomorrow in Japan. I think that's what the holiday is. In fact, just looking up here, that seems to be. I could be wrong about that, but yeah. Anyway, I've got a public holiday. It's the middle of a long weekend, so possibly people who are in Japan are away. But yeah, it's been an interesting week. There's the number now, 7, 8. Got people rocking in. Who do we have in here? Unusually, we don't have DJ Sunnyside up hitting it first. We've got Dan H. Congratulations, first into the comments there. Cobras Tenchi made it in second, watching on a big screen TV for once. Watching this on a big screen TV. Whoa, I feel like I should see how big I can make my face on the big screen. Probably don't want to look too close. That is disturbing. Void Theft, glad that you could make it. You hope that your PC holds on to the end because there's a problem with the power supply. That sucks. Do appreciate you coming in anyway, and at least and definitely setting a good example there, giving a like, and appreciate if everyone can do that, because remember, I don't monetize these videos. I'm literally the only form of payment I accept is likes. So you don't even have to you don't even have to throw peanuts. So I do appreciate that. Squirrels are always waiting and not counted. Well, there we go. And the squirrels should be. That's frankly just species-based discrimination by YouTube not counting all the squirrels. As we know, I'd be Philip DeFranco if we were talking squirrels. So yes, who else we got in here? We've got Lara. Hello indeed. Nice to see all the beautiful people coming into the chat. See all the squirrels. I have squirrels. I think equal rights now for that. They should be counted as views. All the emoji squirrels. We've got Tadom. Great to have you in here again, as always. Only 7 likes. Because I'm using the StreamYard interface, I actually can't in real time from here see the number of likes. I should open up another YouTube screen, but I want to keep all the bandwidth and everything here. So, yeah, please remember to like. I do appreciate that. We can do better. 9, is that 9 likes? We got butter from Dan H. Odie Jr. will come in with the butter boom emojis, hopefully at some point. 7, we got 8 likes. 9 is me included. Oh, thank you for including me. DJ Sunny Side Up. Yo, nice to see that you made it. And everyone else, I hope that you've been having a great week. I hope you're having a nice weekend. It's been a gorgeous weekend in Tokyo after kind of a crappy week. Just in terms of we have this thing where people were complaining the other day that it was like rainy, and it's been like Seattle type weather. It's been gloomy and rainy, and it was like 17 or 18 degrees the other day, and people saying, oh, it's finally cold, which it was. For the first time this year, I wore like a thin hoodie over my t-shirt to work, but when I looked at my app to check the temperature, it said this is 5 degrees hotter than, warmer than normal for this day, for this time of year, just like it was in the summer. It's like Tokyo, even now, is still 5 degrees warmer than usual. It's supposed to be cold and generally dry and sunny now, but we are still at the sort of crossover of the seasons. I think people here who have been to Japan know the deal with this. Japan's like, as the seasons change, we get this shift of weather patterns where we go from having this sort of Philippines, Western Pacific, humid, tropical weather, gets sort of moved over. And on the other side of this barrier, which is like this big rain front. So this is what happens in the rainy season in May. We get a similar thing in October when that shifts back and it gets replaced by this big Siberian high pressure system that gives us cold, dry weather for most of the winter. And normally that's shifted over and we're in the cold, sunny, dry weather, but we are not there right now. We're actually seeing more rain right now than we saw in rainy season. It's been, that said, today we did finally have a sunny day and it was like 24 degrees. It's still like, by New Zealand standards, summer temperatures. I went for a beautiful run. I've got some new shoes, which I'll show you a bit later on. Had to go break them in. And went for a beautiful day for getting outside today. So I don't know. I mean, the rain sucks and there is going to be more rain this week. In fact, the reason I had to break in new shoes was because I was going out running. But all my running shoes are like proper light running shoes that let air go through. They really just basically like drops of rain just pass directly through and soak your socks and your feet. So I wanted to get another pair of shoes that I could wear on rainy days that have some protection. So I got another pair of New Balance running shoes that have Gore-Tex on top, so they're waterproof. So I tried that today. It was a beautiful sunny day, so it wasn't really a wet weather test, but they're good shoes. I must admit, after I railed a couple of weeks ago how I actually did a similar run today where I went running with my Hoka shoes for like 17, 18K, and I got blisters and it was just uncomfortable the whole way. Today I went with these brand New Balance shoes. They were heavier because of the Gore-Tex. They're heavier than what I'm used to. I mean, that's good training, I suppose, but not a problem. They're just comfortable and they just fit me well right off the bat. So I've been through Nikes and I wanted to set them on fire. My carbon plate shoes, I love. The Vaporflies, I love. But the Pegasus, the regular running shoes, are trash. They literally crunch and squeak and they're horrible and not comfortable. The Hokas just don't suit me. I know people love them and I wanted to love my Hokas so much, but I ended up wanting to set them on fire. They just give me blisters and they're just horrible on my feet. And New Balance rocks. So I did that today. Anyway, we have lovely weather. It is still warm. Shouldn't be this warm, but it is. And it is the yen is getting cheap again. All of that. So it is a great time to come to Japan right now. Definitely until the start of January. It's a good time of year. Enough talk about the weather. See, we've got more people rocking in here. Thank heavens, Shubis made it. I was worried. I hope you're having a nice cup of coffee there in Panama. Good to have you with us. Our moderator, Aaron, glad that you can make it. Great to have you in here. We've got a coffee kampai going across from Germany to Panama. Love that stuff. 18 kilometers is a really good distance. So depending on what you mean by good, it is a long distance. Generally above 12K is where you start feeling knees and feet and stuff like that. It was a good test. I did want to break in the shoes and I wanted to do a long run today. So yeah, it's a good, and thinking that now I'm building up to doing the Tokyo Marathon at the very start of March, which for intents and purposes, I suppose, is like 4 months away. So yeah, I'm definitely not gonna, distance when you're talking about hurting your knees and your ankles and stuff like that. Extra distance training isn't necessarily the best way to prepare for that. But I do need to do some longer runs every now and again. So yeah, Mr. Cordy Chap, great to have you in the chat, and I'll probably need to do a few more, at least over 10K. But today I ran 14K. That was a good run. But yeah, definitely good for tourism. The cheap yen is good for tourism. The weather is good for tourism. I mean, Japan, another part of the topics today, but it's just sort of amazing, how Japan has become this sort of tourism country. I never imagined. It was always like Japan was always like the secret spot that only me and a few other people who learned this weird language, Japanese, back in the 90s knew about. And all of a sudden now it's like everybody has figured it out. And I'm kind of happy about that because I tried for so long to explain to people, like, why would I want to live in Japan? But now they've all figured it out and it's a little bit too much. But yeah, I'm glad people have found out. Void Theft, sorry that your computer's conking out there. Well, thank you for joining and leaving a like. I do appreciate it. You have a good week there. And with that, let's get into all of the topics that we have for tonight. There's a fair few. I went through bookmarking just ahead of the session here. And what do I have in here? We've got first up, we have the Olympus CEO Kaufman resigns after an allegation that he was caught purchasing illegal drugs. Now, remembering in Japan, well, Japan actually, for a long time, had a gray zone where, for example, it wasn't like until 2010 that magic mushrooms were specifically outlawed in Japan. There were magic mushroom shops in Shibuya. That said, I never really wanted to go buy any, but you could. I mean, I walked past it every day on the way home. So, because like most countries, you have to specifically name the drugs that you're outlawing. But what Japan doesn't do is it doesn't really have categories. It doesn't differentiate between light drugs and hard drugs. And so, as you all know, marijuana is treated the same as crack cocaine in Japan. There's no differentiation. So, Ritalin, ADHD medicine is treated the same as crack cocaine in Japan, which is why you definitely want to make sure you have that prescription and you don't do anything sneaky about bringing it into the country because people get in trouble. I made a mistake here. I actually said on this tweet that a Toyota board member was importing ADHD meds. That was incorrect. She was actually, her family member, she was actually addicted to, Oxycontin. And her family members were sending her, hidden in a present, a stash of Oxycontin. And basically, she got caught importing that stuff, which, is a mild form of heroin. And that's what she got caught doing. You couldn't really buy OxyContin. I've also told you the hilarious story of how I went in America, apart from the medical malpractice where they anesthetized me against my specific instructions not to fully put me under, and they did it with fentanyl. So I was put on fentanyl against my will and without my consent. It was awesome. Do not recommend. Uh, the other one was they gave me OxyContin to take home, and I had this vial of 12 OxyContins, and someone suggested I could have sold them for a lot of money, but I flushed them down the toilet at the end of the trip. I held on to them in case I got any more kidney stones, but yeah, I don't know. But what drugs could he have been purchasing? That's what I want to know. I would presume he was probably caught buying weed. In spite of the image that Japan, I mean, a lot of Japanese people will tell you Japan has no drugs. And that is not true. I mean, weed, at least at last I heard recently, grows in the wild. There used to be bus tours up in Hokkaido where people get off the bus and pick it and smoke it beside the road. The emperor himself was the patron of the hemp industry in Japan, which until the 1950s was a major, it was GHQ that actually regulated hemp because they wanted Japan to buy synthetic stuff. Of course, hemp is different to marijuana, but as I understand, you can still get a bit of a buzz off it. So, Japan's attitudes on this are recent, but who knows? The big ones, the big drugs, when you're talking drugs in Japan, you're really talking about methamphetamine. A lot of truck drivers, a lot of people. Japan invented methamphetamine. And for a country where people work like crazy, it kind of makes some sense, particularly things like drivers. I mean, same as in other countries. And marijuana just happens to be in a lot of places. People who have no interaction with it, of course, will tell you there are no drugs in Japan. You can't find it. And people who know, it's everywhere. So, but that said, what is a foreign CEO doing? Yeah. So I'm curious to know more details. There are not more details of this, but yeah, when you're in Japan, sometimes people see foreigners and you'll get invited because they'll think, oh, this person, ought to be cool. And that said, even if you get opportunities, just be super careful, especially if you want to live here. Just remember, I know, for example, I had a coworker in New Zealand who was a Japanese woman who was married to a New Zealander who was deported from Japan because he ended up actually offering to be a seller in a bar that he was working at for people. So it was a serious thing. It was a deportable, imprisonable offense. But yeah, remember, if you get deported, you lose everything. You lose your house, your job, everything. So if don't mess around with this stuff. It's like if you're a CEO of Olympus Corporation, just say no. As Nancy Reagan once said, not smart. But there again, I must admit to be curious. Well, was it some Ritalin? I love the episode of Silicon Valley where they had to do some coding on short notice and they all had to be hyper focused. So they went outside going around the streets of Silicon Valley trying to buy Ritalin off the kids. All these programmers. Again, I know attitudes to drugs are different, but remember, don't do drugs, okay? So that is the first one that we have. More people rocking into the chat here. Didn't Woodford resign and whistleblow about a $1 billion accounting scandal? Yes, he did. Yeah, Olympus has been all over the place. So lots of stuff. Yeah, Olympus. More publicity for Olympus. On the election results, of course, last week we were in the midst of the results and we could see what was happening, and it pretty much did play out as it looked. Just kind of interesting, just some quick comments. I know this is super small on the screen, and I don't think I can zoom this in a way. Yeah, it won't let me zoom in on it. But let me tell you, the LDP went down from 256 to 191 seats. This is where you need 230 seats for a majority. So they lost 65 seats, and the Komeito, its coalition partner, went down from 32 to 24. So they lost 8 seats. So the government lost a total of 73 seats. And independents also went down from 6 to 7 that support the government. What was really interesting was in terms of the winners, the two winners were, the three big winners were the CDP, the main opposition. They went from 98 seats to 148. They gained 50 people. An even bigger winner was the Democratic Party for the People, which was basically, they both used to be the Democrats, the CDP and the Democrats for the People. they didn't like each other. There was a leadership fight, and they split off. So yeah, they went from 7 to 28. They gained 21 people, so they tripled in size, quadrupled in size. So they did extremely well, and they kind of hold the balance of power at the moment. And since they're positioning themselves as being more right wing, they've said that they're not going to form a coalition with the LDP, but they might, if they agree with specific initiatives, they might support them. The government's already finding out that they're not going to be supporting them for most things. So they've still got to figure out how to get done what they want to do. The other big winner was the Communist Party. Oh, sorry. The Communist Party was a big loser, and it seems that the Communist Party is now being kind of replaced by the Reiwa Shinsengumi, which is kind of taking over as the preferred vote of the far left. So the Communists lost 2 seats, went from 10 to 8 seats, but Reiwa Shinsengumi went from 3 seats to 9 seats. Reiwa Shinsengumi are just batshit crazy. So, now it looks like, but that said, the Communist Party, they didn't even have a leadership election for 21 years. They were literally, as much as they say, hey, we're not like those other communists, we're just a Japanese normal political party, they're kind of acting like the other communists, and I think they're looking dated right now. So, yeah, anyway, super interesting. And right now, basically, the LDP and Komeito are going to keep being government with a minority, which just means they're not going to get anything done and they're going to be miserable. But we'll find out how that plays out. But interesting times. I'm not going to talk more about the election, but that's just what's happening there. Believe in yourself. Great to see you. And you just got a Zuko macro lens. Just use a Zuko macro lens on any sort of harebrained idea. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'll say that. Is it hard to get opioids in Japan? Yes, it is. I mean, fact is, you can have a baby and they won't even give you, there's only like 3 hospitals in Tokyo that will even give you an epidural if you have complications while having a baby. So, pain is the best medicine, is the philosophy here. There's the access to pain-reducing drugs. That's it. I mean, I've never heard of OxyContin. I'm sure wherever it's appropriate, it's used. Anesthesia and so on is used, but I've never heard of an opioid problem anything like what's in America. So, yeah. In fact, just a random thing. A movie I haven't heard of in years, but I recall being quite good. The Last Boy Scout. I remember the deal with that was, I think it was Damon Wayans, or it was one of the Wayans brothers, and Bruce Willis was in this movie. And this was like from the late 90s, but the whole plot was he was a football player who had an injury, who became an opioid addict, which got him in touch with organized crime. That's possibly a spoiler about the movie, but I haven't even seen it available on any streaming service, and it's from 1989. So, there you go. It's worth looking up. It's actually, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but I remember it as quite a good movie. But it's kind of funny. That kind of foretold the whole opioid epidemic in America. But yeah, in Japan, you definitely hear about meth being a problem. You hear about the devil's lettuce is a constant cause for reefer madness warnings on TV. Those are the 2 that you hear about. You don't hear about other things. But yeah. A Zuko macro lens. Oh, made by Olympus. There we go. I'm not smart. I should have seen that. China is dumping tons of oxy in America. That's what they say. I mean, I don't know anything about that. If they are, but even then, I mean, people aren't buying it from Chinese restaurants. They're getting it from they're getting it prescribed. So there's still a question, why in the hell is there so much stuff being prescribed? I mean, there's a lot of things that are wrong there, but yeah. Dan H, I didn't even want to mention this, but you are right. One of the other big winners here is Sanseito. In fact, are they on this list? They're probably gathered under others, which have gone from 0 to, no, they've got Sanseito here, literally a Sanseito, but Sanseito. They are well-to-do, educated people like organic food, but are crazy conspiracy theory. They're not just crazy conspiracy theorists. Honestly, they are the nasty, virulently anti-Korean. They're the ones in Kawasaki and other areas where there are large neighborhoods full of Koreans, trying to blockade and intimidate school kids going to school at ethnic schools in Tokyo, and having marches through Shinjuku, saying that we should, round up Koreans. The fact that they got 3 seats, the fact that they got any seats is the most disturbing outcome, even though it's only 3 out of 460 seat parliament. I still find it disturbing that they got any seats at all. So yeah, they are hardcore xenophobic and a conspiracy theory. I mean, there are crazier political parties. There is the Happy Science Party, extremely ironically named. They are a religious cult that wants to start a nuclear war with China. And they always field actually the maximum number. They actually sign up. They use all their donations from their religion to sign up members of their religion, their religious cult, in every seat in Japan. They're actually one of the, in terms of participating political parties, they're the biggest political party, and they are effing crazy. And again, lucky that they haven't won a single seat, but Sunseito did. They are literally, we're going to get rid of all the foreigners, and not all, and specifically Koreans and Chinese and so on. And yeah, just really, really mean people. No, definitely not very happy. They are, if you ever look, literally they're calling for war. They literally advocate for nuclear war with China. That is in their manifesto, of this manifesto pamphlets that they hand out called Happy Science. Apparently the whole idea is that happiness will be achieved if you do what the leader of the cult says, which is start a nuclear war. But that doesn't sound like a happy ending that I would want. So yes, indeed, Japanese politics. It is, and you know what? I'll just highlight. I've been highlighting this every week. But as the kid sitting in the back of the car, I have no say in where the car goes or what direction we go in. The rest of the world is just a powerless 3-year-old child sitting in the back of a seat on a 12-hour, on a cross-country drive that America has been taking us through for its election. It impacts us all. You force us to, we can't move, we can't see where we're going, we just have to sit there. And yes, we've all been saying, are we there yet for the American election? Japan has done multiple party leadership elections and a national election. It's all over within like 2 or 3 weeks. America, you took a year and a half. It's finally about to be over. And if the whole purpose of it taking so long is to make you so fed up that you just don't even care who it is that wins, it's close to where we're at. And I'm pretty sure that wearing voters down is part of the intention of the American approach. America, you need to have two-week election cycles. You need to just have the election start and finish within 2 weeks and not allow all this funding rubbish and stuff to happen. People within 2 weeks can make a decision on A or B, honestly, especially given that you only have 2 freaking parties. Everything over 2 weeks is just going to make people crazy. And that's what's happened on both sides. So I'm very glad. I'm glad at least we're going to know which kind of crazy we're going to have to put up with in a couple of weeks, but in a couple of days. And next weekend we will be doing a 2.5 Voyages again, talking about the way in which the world is going to end as a woke hellhole, or or Biff Tannen leading the world. Who knows? But that is a thing. Anyway, continuing on. So Gaiji Mummy, who is a national institution that must be protected at all costs. Kyoto's famous omotenashi. This is something I've seen in Korean supermarkets. I've not seen this in Japan before, but Kyoto, by the way, I also need to caveat. Kyoto, much like parts of Kyushu, is racist, but it's more racist towards Japanese people than it is to you. Kyoto people are more prejudiced against people from other parts of Japan and people from specific classes and backgrounds in Japan than they are against people from other countries. But for what it's worth, the top one says no vacancy. The second line apparently says in Chinese, no vacancy. And the third line says, if you are able to read this Japanese, please come on in. Oh, someone had better not tell them about Google Camera, which, by the way, I didn't know about. I only learned lately that how all these tourists are getting by just pointing their iPhones at stuff, and everything translates better than I could read it. So, the times they are changing, but, it's very, but again, it's also very Kyoto, still thinking it's the capital and that the year is 680 AD. That they think this kind of thing would work. But yes, the famous omotenashi from Kyoto. when I talk about Kyoto being more racist towards Japanese people than foreigners, like there are things you hear about from people who you meet Japanese people from Kyoto, and I remember talking with a taxi driver that was taking around my parents. I think it was my taxi driver. And he was sort of talking about how, so you're from here, and he'd say, well, kind of. Um, I was born here and my parents were born here, but as two generations in, that doesn't count as Kyoto to Kyoto people. So we're not allowed to live within the central Tokyo. It has like a concept of these sort of imaginary rings around the city. And unless you're like three generations in or more, you're not allowed to rent within the innermost circle of the city. You have to sit on the outside. So I'm allowed to rent within two of these rings and stuff. And sort of going through all the different sorts of things. As well as the famous thing about Kyoto that a lot of bars and bars there, like a special sort of the not exactly geisha, but they look like geisha sort of clubs or whatever, where they have these high class trained Japanese sort of made up kimono women who will pour you drinks and do all this sort of stuff. Will not accept customers, will not accept new customers. And you can only come in by the invitation of another member on the condition that you are not allowed to come in if you're only planning to come in once. So the local rules there are crazy. And that's not even setting aside all of the buraku districts, the discrimination zones that they used to have for people who made leather and worked with dead animals or were criminals who had to live in certain parts of the city. That discrimination is now illegal, but it doesn't matter because everybody knows if you've got the surname and you're from that suburb, everybody knows. And in those parts of the country, they don't care about this in Tokyo, except in some very, very small parts of Tokyo. But in Kyushu and in Kyoto, they even if you make keeping those databases illegal, which they have now under these laws, everybody's got the database up here and they apply it. So, it's Kyoto. Kyoto, while being famous for the best hospitality in Japan, with caveats, and that is one of them. That is a funny thing. The taxis are cheap. It's not the only good thing about Kyoto. Kyoto is a wonderful place. It's just it's being completely overwhelmed by unmanaged floods of 33 million tourists just piling into this place at the same time. If Japan managed tourism and spread them all out, I mean, all of Japan is wonderful. You don't just have to go to the Lawson by Mount Fuji and Sensoji and Asakusa and Kyoto. I'm so glad I got to take my mum there before all those things got overwhelmed with tourists. But there's so much more to Japan than those places that everyone's going to. And yeah, Kyoto's become Kyoto people just hate everyone. Well, they do, but they've also got this wonderful way of speaking, like this sort of polite southerner, when they're really stabbing you in the face, but they're talking to you nicely. They've got this wonderful way of doing it in Kyoto, which even when they're screwing with you. I've only been to Kyoto a couple of times, by the way, but it is kind of famous. In fact, even this note, again, I can't zoom up on it, but it Gonyuten kurasai mase. Now, mase is kind of part of Kyoto dialect, but it's also considered, even though it is a dialect, people, when they want to be extra polite, even in Tokyo, they'll put a mase on because it's considered like this high sort of regal court Japanese. So, the fact that they'll literally say fuck off to you, but they'll stick mase on the end just to sound classy about it. It's like putting a Shakespearean ending on a word. Like you have to like that about Kyoto people. And look, they're proud. They're still bitter that they lost the capital. Nara people are still bitter that Kyoto took the capital away from them, literally in the year like 600. Kyoto only lost the capital. I should know when this is as I say it, but I think it was like in the 17th century. But yeah, they're still sore about that. So yes, anyway, Google Lens. Use it as often as you read the auction sheets for used cars. I presume that is often, certainly in Japan. I don't need it, obviously, but when I've seen it working, I've been like, whoa, this is cool. When I talk about wanting to have proper AR glasses, I saw an amazing video that I think I put on here, but if I didn't, yeah, there's like, again, these test AR glasses. We're getting to that world where you can have spontaneous like displays that overlay on the world around you. And people who cannot hear, it didn't even occur to me, but it's like captions on YouTube. Someone showed a demo of being able to show captions of the world. So when people are talking to you and they don't know sign language and you can't read lips or whatever, or you can't hear because they're standing behind you, you can't see, it'll put captions of what people are saying on the glasses for people to see, and people talking how remarkable this is. But think about that for translation, both of voice and for images and stuff like that. Like, I can't wait for, I've been talking about this for years. Self-driving cars and AR glasses are going to be really big, and I've been demanding them for like as long as I've been doing this show, but hopefully they're close. Knickknack95, great to see you there in the chat. Gaijin, it's not just for foreigners. Seriously, that is what I am saying. I mean, when Japan used to have this problem that because, it was a closed country and it didn't have any foreigners, they needed to make up foreigners to bully. So they got all these categories of people to discriminate against. It kind of, in a way, was like this weird kind of social experiment that kind of proved that, getting rid of all the foreigners will not eliminate racism. It'll just create new types of discrimination. This is where all these people talking about getting rid of all the immigrants in America. You think that's going to fix things? It's just going to make you, start to look at, who's who's got freckles. So, so yeah, not a good direction to go in, but that is absolutely a thing. What's the equivalent of Kyoto in other countries? That's a good question. I suppose, you need a country with a large amount of history. The thing is, like UK, London's always been sort of the center of, like it's not like London took away the capital. I think the capital used to be in York under the Romans, but I don't think the York people particularly want the capital back. Italy's always been Rome. France has always been Paris. Is there a Kyoto anywhere else? I suppose the capital of America was New York for a time, but does New York want the capital back? Does anyone want the capital to be in New York, especially New Yorkers? I think most New Yorkers are pissed off that they have to put up with the UN people double parking everywhere. So I don't know. Oh, here we go. Cologne is the Kyoto of Germany, or maybe Hamburg. So there we go. We've got a few people there. But Madrid is so. So yeah, we're talking about a place that used to be the capital and had that taken away. So yeah, it's an interesting question. Oh, so Torino was the capital before Rome. So I guess that would make Torino the Kyoto but there again, of course, you do have places. You could still be Paris, where you are still the capital and you're still dicks about it to everybody. Who knows? But yeah, Kyoto is a special place in many, many ways. The squirrels are strong today. It is 11:04. Oh my God. Yes, we've got lots of people there. Do remember to give the video a like. That's right. Let's star that and move on because I've covered like 2 stories. Interesting graph here. Someone took a whole bunch of languages that showed the speed that languages are spoken and the information density with a general correlation, interesting correlation, that languages which you speak more quickly have a lower density of information. I always thought languages that you don't understand sound fast because you're trying so desperately to catch what they're saying and to listen to every syllable and to translate it, and you want it to be slower so it sounds too fast and overwhelming, which is why when you don't speak languages, they often sound faster, whereas when you understand a language, it sounds slower. So of course, English can be spoken quickly. But according to the scale, where's English? English is sort of on the slow end, which is, I think, what English speakers think. But I always think that your perception of speed is always sort of twisted a little bit by whether you understand it or not. I don't think of Japanese as a particularly, and I was at a time reasonably fluent in Spanish. And I remember when I met Central Americans, Puerto Ricans or whatever, in particular, people who speak down there, they speak super fast. Like they're proud of how quickly they speak and how many syllables they can cram together, mainly for insults in a short period. Shubas, back me up here. There are people, particularly Central America, I think they're proud of speaking the fastest Spanish. And yeah, that was fast. I think of Spanish as a much faster language than Japanese, for example. In the languages sound quite similar, at least. Some of the dialects, some of the Spanish versions of Spanish are very similar to Japanese. But yeah. Italy, what happened to Italy? Italy's like syllables per second are like all over the place. I guess this is because Italian is so diverse within Italy. Korean is quite widely spread as well. Japanese is like universally fast. Thai is slow. I suppose I could see that, but interesting. It's an interesting graph here where it just sort of shows the difference between information density. I always thought Japanese was more information dense, at least in the sense that in Japan, well, it's not information dense that you pack a lot of things into sentences. You leave a lot of things out because information is assumed to be there. So you can kind of get more across by saying less because you don't have to say every single thing in Japanese. because it's a small island country that had no interaction with anyone else. So everything was already understood. So you could leave tons of things out, which is really the challenge of translating Japanese, is you can express long sentences in English and very short sentences in Japanese, which you think would make it easier to speak more slowly. But there again, what they're actually saying literally is less, but they're expressing more. That's the and they're expressing more imprecisely, which is why it's such an awkward language to translate into English. Like you say whole sentences where you're not saying who does exactly, exactly who does exactly what, exactly where and when. Japan doesn't bother with that stuff. The thing will be henceforth proceeded. And everyone's like, oh, good. It's all taken care of. And you're supposed to just know all the details. English, languages is funny. Languages from countries that have empires famously are more expressive because there's more chance for misunderstanding. All the assumptions that people from your village will understand when you're dealing with people who are learning your language as a second language or from other places. Latin was famous for this as well. It didn't leave details out because those details you left out would be misinterpreted. And English kind of had that, having a big global empire, which is good for law. It's good as someone who's a lawyer in English. It means that they designed the language is designed in a way that you can't complete sentences without a lot of particular information, which you can, in contrast, when you write contracts in Japanese, particularly when you write these memorandums of understanding, you can write a coherent legal document in Japanese, leaving tons of information out that makes it untranslatable because you don't even say who is doing what. And yet it sounds coherent, completely coherent in Japanese when someone says, well, so who's got to take the action on item 1? I'm like, nobody knows. So languages, I love this stuff. Anyway, Brad F, good to see you in the chat. English. What? Thanks for clearing that up. Yes, indeed. Brad F. Geelong, the real capital. Just kept that a secret. Go Cats. I think I've said this to Brad F. before. As a kid who grew up in Point Lonsdale, which is just south of Geelong, which is, of course, the rightful capital of Australia, or at least Victoria, or at least the southwestern part of Victoria, specifically southwestern Port Phillip Bay. Go Cats. Jacko, I was living near Geelong when Jacko was playing for Geelong, Aussie rules team. In fact, that was back when it was the VFL. So there you go. Go Cats. They're my team. Essendon when I was smaller, but there you go. Anyway, no squirrels here. Weird UK. UK apparently now has a birth rate of 1.44, which is exactly what Japan's fertility rate, 1.43. So, 1/100th of a, out. But apparently now they have that. When Japan had that lower birth rate, BBC aired to think it was because Japanese guys were having sex with their pillows and frigid Japanese men in their video games. But now the UK has it, and it's perfectly normal. So again, it wasn't that Japan was weird. It was that Japan was just ahead of the curve. Giro is really correctly pointing out, which I point out. I want to throw back. I mean, hey, England, how many? I would be interested though. So when was this? 2013. They took this at 2013. I would bet you between 2013 and now, sales of waifu pillows in the UK, I would bet money have increased. I'll bet you that they're selling more anime wife pillow girlfriends in the UK. I think you should look into this. I think this could be either that or Brexit, and alcohol will always be a factor. Whatever's happening, whether the birth rate's going up or down, alcohol is always going to be a factor for the UK. But yeah, the fact that Japan, I mean UK, where are they selling used underwear in vending machines in the UK? And I can tell you, I've never been interested. I've never seen such a vending machine. But if a vending machine does exist, and there's one in Japan and one in the UK for used underwear, yeah, I think I'll only use the UK one if I need a parachute. So next we have again just showing how Japanese political parties smelly parachute. No, definitely. Ugh, UK, please stop. Here we go. I'm going to continue. LDP factions getting destroyed. IBIS old factions gone from 59 to 20. They had a lot of corruption. ASO's faction 40 to 31. Kishida's faction, 34 to 26. Basically, yeah, all of them. Motegi's 32 to 27. Nikai went from 31 to 21. And Moriyama, who I can't even remember who he is exactly, but they say the same. But basically getting wiped out over corruption and so on. The High Court of Japan, not the Supreme Court. I don't think this is the highest court, but they did rule on a case being brought that at the moment, Japan, at a local level, there are places that recognize same-sex marriage. And if you get married in an embassy or overseas, you can get married and come back to Japan and be treated as spouses. You just can't get married in a lot of parts of Japan. It's not nationally recognized. And so some people are saying that the national government, there's been a lot of talk for a long time that overwhelmingly publicly in Japan, like polls show, even among conservatives, yeah, why not? There's no Christian opposition to the idea of what the definition of a marriage should be. So there's consensus in Japan that same-sex marriage, yeah, why not? There's no problem. It's only some small, even very small factions within the LDP that are not progressing reform on this or saying let's just leave it up to local governments. And so wanting to pressure the central government to actually legislate to fix this issue, saying that denying same-sex people the right to marry is unconstitutional. They took this up to the High Court of Japan, which found, yeah, we agree. The rights, the guarantee of equal rights under the Constitution is not being met by this. And so the ball is being thrown again to Ishiba to go and get this done. And one would have to think that, if he put out a bill on it, the opposition parties would support it. It's literally only the LDP that's the biggest opponent to this. And it was one of the reasons that they did so badly in the election, among other things. And Ishiba promised that he was going to progress on separate surnames for married people and same-sex marriage. And then he completely changed his mind right after he won the leadership election and reversed course on it, which everyone's like, what the hell? Which is why, again, he did so badly. So, yeah. Taro Aso is my person. I'd love to get Taro Aso in 2.5 Voyages. That would be awesome. Yeah, Kyoto. There's a Kyoto Whopper, which isn't just for people who can read the label. Apparently, the definition of the Kyoto Whopper is that it's got the regular Whopper, but they've got like this layer of rice. And my comment there, as you can see on the screen, I know I've been in Japan too long, but I see this and I think, oh my God, why would you put rice on bread? Because it's something, the idea that, having like a side, when I first came to Japan, I might have a meal with rice and I might just like a bread roll and some butter or something beside it. And people would say, dude, what are you doing? There is rice. It's like you cannot mix rice and bread in a meal in Japan. And it's like, but you don't need bread. You've already got rice. I'm like, yeah, rice is rice, bread is bread. I like bread. I like rice. Why can't we have both? And people are like, dude, now you're just being weird. Stop it. So I came around. It took 25 years, but I came around. Okay, rice and bread shall never be in the same room together. I like Batman and Clark Kent. That's completely wrong. Superman and Clark Kent. You're never going to see the two of them in the same room. As far as I can tell, in Japanese culture, rice is basically bread wearing glasses and a suit. But somehow in Kyoto, they've managed to manifest and materialize rice and bread in the same burger. And I'm completely confused by this. How do you even do that? But that's maybe a sign that I've been here for too long. In Italy, it is potatoes and bread or pasta. Wait. It's potatoes and bread or potatoes and pasta. Oh, so you don't have potato pasta. You can have bread with pasta, right? Yeah, you must be able to do that. Yeah. I suppose I've never seen French fries pasta. That wouldn't really work. But anyway, that's a thing that came out. So Japan innovating. Lots of cool rockets. The New Zealand Neutron rocket is coming out next year. That looks awesome. But also the New Glenn rocket, that's going to launch like in November. Can't wait for that. I've been kind of a fan watching this project for a long time. So on top of that amazing SpaceX rocket launch, we're having this coming up as well. So I'm looking forward to all the cool space stuff. My headphones that I always wear on the live stream, and these are also Bluetooth, so I wear them when I go on trips. They've got these colored, this is like the WMX0003, so they're a couple of generations too old. The old AirPads where you're starting to get that leather falling apart thing, so I thought, yeah, it's time to get some new ones. And these are actually cooling gel ones. I thought, well, I could get the same color, but why not? Why not make it interesting? So I got these sort of red and black. Not a perfect match, but I quite like the look. I think it actually go. I think the red kind of goes with this and looks a bit more interesting. So on the after party, which you're all invited to come and join me, we can see if the new earpads work perfectly good. But there we go. Aaron, that is an excellent point. And I agree. I also cannot get on board with yakisoba in hot dog buns, and I also do not like that. You are absolutely right about that, and it is a contradiction. I remember when it was new, and there was a thing on TV. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't even say this, but of course I'm going to say it. There's a thing on TV where people were reacting the same way, but it's kind of an interesting thing, and people were like, "Oh, that actually tastes good." So there's a TV show where they got one of those things, and apparently they freeze dried it, and then they put it into a blender, and then they mixed something into it to drink it. As like a challenge on a TV show to test if it was really the flavor that everyone was into. Do not recommend. But there you go. Here are the new shoes that I got that I was talking about. I like, again, these New Balance shoes I got the other day. The 1080s were the really cushioned ones, were so great. But they are not waterproof at all, and it was miserable running, and it's raining all the time. So I actually went and got another pair. I got these. These are 880s, so they're less cushioned, but they have Gore-Tex, so they're waterproof, and ran 14K in them today. That's me running 14K in them. Good pace. Black shoes makes me feel like I'm wearing, work boots or something when I'm running. Also because they're heavier and they're black, they don't feel like real running shoes in that regard. But it does mean I can wear them with jeans and I can wear them to work, which I do like. Which it means if I've got to travel somewhere, like I've got travel coming up. I'm going to Osaka, not this week, but next week, and I'm going to Korea the week after that. And I like to take shoes that I can also go out for runs when I'm there. So this will work. I'll take some things to put in to make sure they don't smell. But yeah. So these are great. I'm super happy with these shoes anyway. So that is a thing. Also in Japan, I mean, I don't watch baseball. I don't even watch Japanese baseball, but everyone was watching the World Series, and everyone was supporting the Dodgers here because everyone loves not just Ohtani, of course. Yamamoto, the pitcher, of course, also did a fantastic job. Ohtani actually relatively quiet during the World Series, but of course he did such a big role in getting there, and he's such an extraordinary player. I'm not a baseball expert, but what I can say is what I've said here. He's his popularity in America, Japan, not just for being such a great baseball player, extraordinary talent in terms of baseball, but also his personality. Like when I think about other great, superstar Japanese baseball players, particularly Ichiro, when he went over to America, Ichiro as well, I think is a good ambassador. He's not like a dick, but he is as a Japanese person, uniquely sort of confident. He's confident. And some would say it's not arrogance because he backs it up, but he says, yeah, I never understood why I wasn't always hitting 400 because in my mind, I felt like I was always hitting every single ball. But Ohtani doesn't even talk like that. He obviously plays with confidence, but he always just speaks very nicely and humbly, even though he's one of the most extraordinary baseball players of all times. Which I think is a case again where you've got where the government's trying to do all the stuff to make Japan look cool and generally fucking it up. You just let Japanese people do their thing. And the fact that this guy could have turned out to be a dickhead. I mean, this guy was known as a prodigy. He was making the national news when he was in high school because he was already being scouted by Major League, and Japanese clubs, professional clubs, were trying to persuade him not to go to America yet and to try Japanese baseball and stuff. So he had everything laid out for him, and he could have been, kind of spoiled by it all. And, and everyone was thinking he's too good to be true. And when his interpreter was found to have all those gambling debts, and they were like, oh, they're making the translator. Even I was saying, oh, they've got to be having the translator taking the fall for Ohtani. And it turns out, no, it really was the translator, and Ohtani really was a nice guy. Also, the fact that Ohtani has blacklisted Fuji TV for doxing where his house is and stuff like that. And even the way he goes about that, he could say anything he likes and everyone would support it, and everyone knows that he's sort of boycotting them. But he doesn't say anything. He just doesn't talk to them, but again, on top of just being so extraordinary, and you talk about how it's resulted in all these sponsors, all this money now being flooded into American baseball and to LA Dodgers specifically, like the boost this will have for America from having this Japanese superstar over there, as well as, frankly, the goodwill back towards Japan. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, great thing. Man, Japan, Ohtani, whatever country Ohtani is from, and it happens to be Japan, but even if it was like New Zealand or, Australia or whatever, no country really deserves to have a player that extraordinary and that nice a guy. Japan's super lucky to have him, and it's great to see him flying the flag. So yeah. Japan doesn't need to promote itself. It's awesome as is. Yeah. So it's a bit like what I was saying in the beginning. It doesn't really, but it was kind of like Japan started when I first came to Japan. Like when I came to Japan to live, I came to Japan multiple times before I came. It was like a secret spot. It was like a place that me and a few other people knew. And whenever I'd go to America or New Zealand, and I'd say I live in Japan, and people would go, it's like saying I live in Kazakhstan. It's like, oh, I think I know where that is. Well, why would you live there? Was always the question. And I'd say, because it's fucking awesome. I'm swearing a bit, but it was the truth. And people would say, oh, interesting. Like what's great about it? And I'm like, I'd say all the things, and they'd say, oh, and they're going to forget it later on. But now everyone's figured it out. The secret is out. And I'm kind of happy that the secret is out, because I was preaching the secret for so long. But now I'm like, okay, can we go back to having it as a secret now? But yeah, you're right. It kind of did need to promote itself, and it still honestly needs to manage the way it promotes itself better. But there we go. Oh, this is super interesting. Speaking of tourism, Tokyo, Shizuoka Prefecture. Now, actually, was it Shizuoka or was it Yamanashi? Because they both. Oh, it's Yamanashi. Oh, because Shizuoka is thought of as the gateway to Mount Fuji. They both. It's like Mount Blanc, with Italy and France fighting over which country it's in. Yamanashi and Shizuoka both are kind of like jostling to who's the premier, entry point for Mount Fuji. And most people agree it's Shizuoka. However, Yamanashi is planning to build a rail line which will go directly up to the car park at the base of where most people start. You can walk from the bottom, and there are 10 stations spread equally up the mountain. But most people drive up to the car park halfway up the mountain on Station 5, and you can walk pretty comfortably up to Station 8. And then from 8 to 10, it gets pretty uncomfortable. It's a serious mountain, and it's pretty intense. But you need a car or to get on a bus or something to get to that Station 5. And that still millions of people go there every year, but it is kind of, if you're from Tokyo and you don't have a car, that is a barrier. So in Yamanashi, they're actually planning to put a rail line that goes directly up to the 5th station, which actually, I think that unlocks access to the mountain for so many people in Tokyo. That idea that I've done myself of deciding over drinks on Friday night, hey, let's go climb Mount Fuji tomorrow. And turning into a horror movie, you can do that even more easily now, because they'll have a train there. A problem, of course, that the mountain is overcrowded, and they're trying to reduce the numbers on the mountain. So putting a train up there could be seen as going in the other direction of that. But at the same time, I think charging for entry on the mountain and doing other things to sort of control the numbers, but improving the access, that would be great. That would be something I would be all for. And as someone who lives in Tokyo and doesn't have a car, who loves to drive, but in Tokyo you just don't want a car. You can't park anywhere. It's a nightmare to drive. So yeah, I'm all for that. So we'll see what happens there. But Yamanashi's planning that, probably to also make sure people think of it as a Yamanashi mountain. So yeah. Other people maybe not so sure about it. I see Lara's not so sure about it. But who knows? Interesting thing here that, the government's promising to increase the minimum wage in Japan to set a universal minimum wage. I think of, what was it again? Right now, some prefectures, it's like 900 yen, and they're talking about putting it up to 1,500 yen, which is only $9.90, but by the end of the 2020s. So they're giving themselves a long runway on this, and it's a relatively modest increase. I think in Tokyo, the minimum wage is like 1,200 yen, so it's only 300 yen, but a lot of small businesses that are saying we're already absolutely struggling, and if you force us to increase the minimum wage, we're going to go out of business. And a lot of these small business lobbies are influential with the LDP. So the government's setting up expert panels to consult with small businesses to figure out how they can get them to increase wages in ways that won't make them go out of business. And just the thought I had when I was reading this today was, part of my job involves working in government policy. And one thing I really like about Japan is someone who sees policy across the region of APAC, in Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia, all these countries. Most countries, when a politician wants to say we're going to raise the minimum wage, they don't really, they'll campaign on it, they'll get elected, and then they'll do their best to follow through and make it happen. And, often they'll just rush to write the thing and get it out and claim the win. And because of rushed legislation, there's so many cases where I'm involved sometimes in doing policy work of talking with lawmakers and making sure that laws are designed that they work well and that they're not just badly thought out. And nothing worse than having a law that doesn't work. And what I like about Japan is that where a lot of countries will do this sort of knee-jerk lawmaking and pass laws that they realize after the fact don't really work properly, Japan will always make an effort to make sure they listen to everybody, and even and sincerely listen. It's this Japanese culture thing of consensus. They won't necessarily in the end incorporate every opinion, but everybody they're pretty good at going around and making sure, because they don't want a stakeholder to say later on that you did this without consulting. That's culturally just a bad thing. And it's even for people who disagree with the policy, and even when the policymakers here have made up their mind that they're going to do this, the fact that they set up the opportunity for people to propose ways to make this work that takes their thoughts into account is something that's really common in Japan. And it means it takes ages for laws to get done. But at the same time, I think the quality of legislation, I say this as a lawyer here, I think the quality of legislation in Japan is really high, because they don't just, they don't rush into making laws to score points. They actually do, relatively speaking, think things through. No country's perfect, but the examples I find Japan, I deal with other countries as well, and I find Japan, like in terms of dealing with the government, really, really positive on this. So I think this is a good example of that. 2 minutes left. A couple of really big ones. One really big one is that Halloween happened this week, and there's a lot of play about how they were banning drinking in the street in Shibuya and in Shinjuku, trying to get away from all these sort of rowdy crowds that have happened in the past in these neighborhoods. A lot of people, particularly Phoenix 789 or 7, whatever his, I should know his handle properly, but Zach, organizer of the Hanami, very much an advocate of buying some drinks because the izakayas are too expensive and just drinking them in the street, being kind of pissed off at this. I don't do that sort of thing, and honestly, to me, I feel like this is something, that I think got out of hand. It certainly always was that Japan didn't like police people with cans. They didn't police drinking, and you'd see drunk salarymen and homeless people drinking sometimes, but it was at a sufficiently low and manageable level that you could allow some people could do it, because people didn't take advantage. And although it's not exclusively a foreigner thing, there are plenty of Japanese joining in. At the same time, it was overwhelmingly prominent that what was happening was foreigners were doing here what they do in New Zealand or America, which is that they were loading up. Before you go pay for drinks at bar prices, you go buy a whole bunch of cheap drinks and you get loaded up on those first, so you don't spend as much in the bars. And because people don't hang out in houses in Japan, they were doing this in the street in Shibuya, and sometimes discovering, hey, you don't even have to go into a bar. You could just clog up the streets and get drunk, get shit-faced. And what was happening was the bars were getting pissed off because these people are keeping patrons away from the places, because they're blocking up center guy and stuff like that, and it's kind of creating an atmosphere a lot of customers don't want to go through, and they're not spending money in any of the businesses there. So it was actually the business associations of Shibuya. They wanted to ban street drinking, and they wanted to ban the convenience stores from selling alcohol in those neighborhoods, basically because they were stopping people using the izakaya. I used to live near Shibuya, and it was during Halloween, everyone would go and do these massive, really cool Halloween parties inside all the clubs and bars, and that all moved into the street. And I think it was bad for the businesses there. So I am kind of curious, given that they cracked down on the drinking and said, don't have your Halloween parties here, I'm wondering if that led to the bars collecting up more customers and getting the desired benefit, or did it lead to people not having Halloween parties at all, and maybe it caused them to have less business? I'm curious about that. Zach is like, screw the bars, they charge too much anyway, which is, again, as someone who doesn't drink that much anyway, so he's directly impacted and I am not, so I respect it to that extent. But at the same time, I do think this is why we can't have nice things. It's because a few, foreigners make up less than 3% of the population, yet they were pretty visibly doing the old Yamanote Line Halloween party and then the Shibuya thing. And it's something that it feels to me like people took advantage of these rules that allowed a little bit of flexibility to let you, appropriately have a bit of fun, and it just ruined it for everybody, frankly. So I think it was kind of good that they kind of pulled it back this year, and hopefully we'll come back to just having a more of a low level thing. This is what I was talking about with the AR glasses. There's a great video here. You can check that out on my Twitter. I just posted that this evening. Oh, there is a funny one here that the Prime Minister, they asked the Prime Minister, do you ever say to your wife, I love you? And apparently he said, no, I wouldn't say anything like that. What, are you out of your mind? It is a thing in Japan. People just don't say it all the time anyway in Japanese. Some do. Some young people reacted like, oh my God, he's from that generation that they, maybe it showed the generation of the Prime Minister. I do remember when I was learning Japanese in New Zealand, when I was working at a souvenir shop, my Japanese boss would say, go up to the married guys and ask them, is your wife beautiful? In New Zealand, there's only one safe answer to that question that you can legally say to anybody. And so when all these Japanese guys would go, oh, yeah, bussa, 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 I was like, what? And like most guys would react, oh, my wife is an ugly old hag. Part of that is the old Japanese thing about, you don't brag about, bragging about your wife is part of like yourself. So to someone else, if you say that they're really good looking, it's saying, bow to them, it's not humble to brag about someone in your court. You have to be humble about your own court. But also they would blow that. And I was like, oh my God, you would be literally, in my words here, that would be grounds for justifiable homicide in New Zealand. Well, that was a big cultural difference. Definitely people probably from my age and older, that still is kind of a thing. It's changing now, but there we go, cultural differences. Oh God, there's so many good things here. I do want to get to the after party, but very quickly rushing through. Somebody from New York came to Japan, may have been their first time ever outside of New York State, and learned all these amazing things from Japan. There is an incredible thread here where he starts out, I'm stunned after I spent a month in Japan. Japan is so radically different. It left me speechless. And you know what? Everyone's piling in on this guy for all of his stupid and mistaken observations. But you know what? This person genuinely is going through like a mental breakdown moment of realizing that, man, does New York actually suck? Can we do better? And this is what travel should do, right? Even if you interpret it wrong, it gives you a lens through which to observe what you wish you could do better and what your own country is like. So he's saying here, and everyone's making fun of it, including me, because it is wrong and it is funny, that look at all these people on the trains. They don't read, they're not glued to their screens. They don't look at their iPhones or their smartphones when they're on public transport. They just meditate and contemplate and read books. Absolutely not true. I don't know how he could have that impression. And some people saying, is he making that up? But you know what? At the same time, he's having a moment here where he's thinking, yeah, maybe I shouldn't just be looking at my freaking screen all the time. And if that's the case, even if it's a mistake, good for you for going out into the world and developing a perspective that maybe your stuff is wrong. And maybe things can be done better. And so I don't want to pile in on this guy. Seems like a lovely person. So that's my conclusion. But when I first went to Vancouver, Canada, after going to Seattle so many times, I was like, oh my God, everybody in Seattle has to go to Vancouver just to see what can happen when you give a shit about paying taxes and making sure that public services work. How much better it is for everybody. Like the quality of living is so different. Meditate on that strong zero, sir. Yeah, let's pray for him. Yes, indeed. Indeed, the strong zero. And somehow these are still here. Oh, wait, this is not the bookmarks anymore. So I think that's the end of it. Oh, yeah, and there were these maps. These maps are lies, but this is where I'm going to finish. This is a map that somebody made of Japanese stereotypes of European countries. This is fake because, one, you can't see it. But two, even if I zoom in and make it a little bit more visible, Japanese do not know about leprechauns. If you ask a Japanese what's a leprechaun, they're not going to know about that in Ireland. French people are slim. Romania is Dracula. These are things that maybe an American would think. The only things about this map that to me resonate as things that Japanese people would think. England has bad food. Scotland has whiskey. Turkey loves Japan. That is actually accurate. Bulgaria has yogurt also. That is there's a favorite brand of yogurt in Japan is literally called Bulgaria. So yeah, that's an easy one. Maybe Spain good at football. Japanese do not have an opinion on Andorra. They do not think of Germans as killed the Jews. I mean, they did, but that's not that does not dictate. They absolutely do not think of Austria as musical. They don't think of the freaking Sound of Music. They think of music. There's definitely the Music Association. So maybe they actually mean musical. Maybe that's a fair one. I mean, but these are not. This is a made up map. It's kind of what a person would think Japanese would think. It's entertaining, but it is wrong. However, Gaijin Mummy to the rescue. She made the USA according to Japan that she made up. Ichiro, so that's what weed smells like. Full House, yeah, Shohei Ohtani. Fair enough. Little Japan over here with these islands. Fat people with guns, guns and drugs. Fat people. Drugs. Fat people with guns are also on drugs. This is a pin, Pennsylvania. Yeah, this is a highly accurate map. So, credit to Gaijin Mummy for that. All of that is the show. It is 11:38. I'm going to go set up the after party. Do come and keep me company for that. Remember, I haven't actually streamed much this week. I have bought a whole lot of tracks though, so I've got some new tracks of my own. It's always a lot of fun. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter to keep up with all this nonsense during the week. Hope that you're having a great time. If you're not in Japan, come. It's a great time of year to come. And remember, if you ever come here and you want to hang out, I'm free. Anyway, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, you can DM me. And yeah, hang around. The link for the after party, please. There we go. Aaron, ahead of the curve. Remember to like the video because that is literally the only thing that keeps me going. It is my life support, so please do that. And yeah, that's the show. So boom, peace. Have a good one, everybody. See you next week. And if I don't see you at the after party, about to start in a couple of minutes. So see you soon. Thanks. See you later. Boom, peace. Any stream.